All right, so a lot has happened in these past couple months, so I'll try to make it quick. Where we last left off, I believe I bent a valve and I got everything back together, and I ended up going to another drift event and I ended up pending get another valve. So I had to tear everything down again, and I learned, I learned from my mistakes. I ended up deciding to upgrade the valve springs because I think the whole reason for both the valves bending was due to valve float from just keeping it pegged on like 65, 7,000 RPM. But I ended up getting everything back together yet again. We went out to the track, and this just recently happened. While we were at the track, I ended up blowing one of the pistons, and it's actually right here. It's piston number 5. So I ended up damaging the skirt, I guess, the side of the piston, and had complete compression loss. So that was only like 3 or 4 laps in while we were tuning everything. So it's back here now, and as you can see, this is the old block. I ended up tearing everything apart. I pulled it out, did all the work. My garage is a complete mess right now, but now that it's out, my plan was initially to get a new block. So the block is behind me, but the block, when I measured it with the bore gauge real quick, I found that the diameter for the cylinder walls are just a bit too big than what BMW recommends as the tolerance. That's a no-go. But what I'm thinking now is of reusing this block, just replacing the piston, getting new bearings, new piston rings, hopefully honing cylinder number 5, and fixing all the damage that was done. It's not really that much. It's just a little bit of aluminum is stuck to the cylinder wall. So hopefully we'll be able to get that out. So it's still a maybe. I guess what we'll be doing is cleaning it, honing it, decking the block, and then just checking to see if the cylinder wall will be okay. And then putting everything back together with new components, and hopefully we'll make hopefully we'll make the M50 bulletproof. But that's kind of the plan, and I am planning on going back to explaining everything that I've done with the car with that series, but I'm just kind of waiting until I know everything is dialed in and I know that the car is reliable, so I don't feed you guys any misinformation. But yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get started with cleaning it and honing the cylinder walls and all that, and I'll let future me explain the rest. So let's get into it. Okay, so so I just want to reiterate that this is going to be a budget rebuild, emphasis on budget, but honestly it's going to be more of a refresh, so that means I'll be avoiding machining or upgrading to forged internals. Machining probably would be a good idea. I don't know, I guess in a way I was treating this as a test to see if you do actually need to machine the block for boost. So we'll just be decking the block, like I said, honing the cylinders. We'll also be replacing the piston rings, replacing the bearings, and replacing the bolts, since those are one-time use, supposedly. But yeah, this is more of a test, if anything. I didn't want to go ahead and buy all the forged internal stuff. First of all, just because they're super expensive and it would have tripled the budget. But I also am not going for a crazy amount of power here. Honestly, 350 horsepower to 400 reliable is what I'm looking for. I don't want that much power. So I'm hoping, if this test works out good, that we can keep the engine stock, and just with the small stuff that I mentioned, with just essentially just cleaning the engine and throwing in some new parts, that it'll be enough to make it reliable and last a long time. Or hopefully at least a year. Honestly, that's what I'm aiming for. A year and I'll be happy. At least enough time to save up to maybe get a different engine with some forged internals. Alright, so I just pulled out all the pistons and I was taking a look at the bearings. You can't really see it on the camera, but it looks like all these cylinders, what is that? We got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Looks like all the bearings are just normal wear. They are worn, but everything seems to be okay. But when I took a look at piston 6, actually when I was pulling it out, it was getting stuck, and when I pulled it out and took a look at it, there's clearly some damage on it. And this one, I don't know, I guess maybe 5 and 6, something was going on between them. So I was also taking a look at the bearings, and you can tell that it's definitely scored up, and for some reason it was either getting a lack of lubrication, or I'm thinking it was overheating. You know, I don't have an oil cooler right now, so that might also be a good idea, because you know, the oil could have overheated as well. And I mean, it could have been lack of oil pressure too. So I'm also going to be looking towards picking up an what's it called, an oil pressure sensor, as well as an oil temperature sensor. But yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, I do think it was overheated towards the back of the block, so that was my mistake. But yeah, this is what I found so far. So next I'll take off the crankshaft, and we'll move from there. Alright, so I just removed the crankshaft. It's over there, and taking a look at the block, I took out the bearings, and yeah, I think this is going to be a bigger problem than I thought. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks like that right there is a bunch of aluminum shaving built up. And when I look at the bearings themselves on the caps, they are not in good shape. There was definitely a lot of contaminant, like a lot of pieces of aluminum that ran through these bearings, and they got just completely destroyed. So I'm sure that they'll still be reusable, not the bearings themselves, but the like the caps, the crankshaft might not be. I was checking it out right now, and it doesn't look super damaged, but I'm afraid that there's a lot of like metal particles inside, like the oil grooves. And this, what is this? This is for, I don't know, one of the bearings on the crankshaft. This one specifically looks like it might have been slightly damaged. So what I'm thinking of doing right now is not using that one. Thankfully I do have this second engine, so I could take the crankshaft off of this one. Since I'll be replacing the bearings and stuff anyways, I could just swap crankshafts and just make sure that, for example, like the cylinder head is thoroughly cleaned. So I think for now what we'll do at least is just kind of leave this alone, and we can handle honing the cylinders and seeing if we can fix cylinder number 5, and we'll also turn it around and deck the block. And if I decide to get this hot tanked or not, we'll see by then. If not, either way, this engine over there is gonna have to come up on the stand, and we're gonna have to swap the crankshaft over anyways. And I'm guessing a lot of the other parts that might be contaminated with metal now. Either that, or I just thoroughly clean them and just make sure that they're clean. But I'm probably just gonna try to replace as many parts of this engine with that one as I can. So yeah, let's turn it around and get the decking done, as well as honing the cylinders. So for decking, I picked up a kit off of Amazon that came with a sanding block, as well as various different grit sizes of sandpaper. So my plan was just to start with 400 grit and work my way up to 3000, which was the max that came with the kit. I honestly could have started with 120, and I think would have shortened the process down a bit. This ended up taking about an hour. I also used WD-40 as lubricant, and I think 3000 was probably overkill too. I think 400 grit honestly would have been fine, but I thought, why not? I already had it, so I might as well just take it up all the way. So this was a gradual process. It did end up taking about an hour to do, and I wasn't going for perfection here. I just mainly wanted to take off the high spots and just kind of clean the top of the block, so when I made the head gasket and the cylinder head and put everything back together, it'd be nice and clean. I'm pretty sure if I try to make it perfect and brand new, it would have took all day, if that. So I think this is fine. And afterwards, I checked the top of the block for straightness. So I used a straight edge and a feeler gauge, and just checked around, seeing if I could fit it anywhere. Looking for warpage, and I was looking around. I googled it, I checked the forums, and I couldn't really find a specific tolerance for the warpage. I found it on the cylinder head, or I found it for the cylinder head. I actually had to make an account with Mitchell just to kind of verify all the BMW tolerances. But for the cylinder head, it's 1.2 thousandths of an inch, which is a really small tolerance. So I felt comfortable with just kind of upping that to 2 thousandths. And I mean, I didn't have any problems with head gasket failure or anything like that, so I thought it'd be okay. I figured that the block was straight anyways, and it did end up being straight. And this is around the time where everything started going wrong. So honing itself, I am not a fan of honing. It took way too long just trying to hone one cylinder down. I guess it was because there was some pretty deep scratches, which I didn't notice before, but once I actually looked inside and took a real good look at each individual cylinder, I noticed that, they all had deep scratches. They were really narrow, and there's only a couple, but they were there, and it bugged me. So the process of honing itself is pretty simple. As I'm doing right here, all you really need to do is just keep a slow speed on the drill and just go back and forth. And for the finishing passes, just make sure you're getting a 45-degree cross hatch angle. But as you will soon see, as I start inspecting it, I start noticing that they're all messed up. They all have scratches, and I tried taking them out at first, but it took me days, man. Honestly, it took me days just to try to get them out. And by the time that I measured them out with the bore gauge, they were really close to the edge of the specifications. Some of the cylinders were even out of specification. So I realized that the only solution would be either to take it to machine shop and get everything overboard, and have to get new pistons, new connecting rods. It would be just a lot more money for this simple build that we're trying to do. So I went for plan B, and instead of doing all that, I figured it'd probably be best if we just pick up a different engine and just start over again. So that's what we ended up doing. All right. Cut the footage. That was just some stock footage. I kind of forgot to record our little trip, except for this part here. This is actually Nevada. So to swap blocks, I went on Facebook Marketplace, but I couldn't find any blocks near my location, except for one, 2.5 hours away. and a state away in Nevada. I live in Sacramento, so that meant I had to go through Lake Tahoe to get there. It was $50, so that was nice. And he also hooked it up with an engine stand. So we set off here. This is some footage of Nevada. Kind of forgot to record until we got there. But yeah, it was a fun trip. We ended up going up through Tahoe, but we ended up coming back through Reno, only because the road up to Tahoe is so damn steep, and the brakes on my truck started shuddering like crazy. So I was nervous coming back down through Tahoe. Reno isn't that bad. It's not as steep of a decline. So we ended up coming all the way around. We basically made a really big circle. Whole trip took like all day to do, but it was fun. It was definitely worth it. All right, so we just got back. Here's the new engine, stand included. He actually threw that in. Here's the old one. So I'm gonna start tearing everything down on the new one. And I already checked the cylinders, and they seem to be in decent shape. Seem to measure out okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start tearing everything down, take everything apart, deck the block again, hone the cylinders, and move on from there. So through the power of editing, I'll be back shortly. All right. And we're done. So I got the block decked, and I honed all the cylinders as best as I could. I did find some small scratches along some of them, so I just did the best I could to get rid of them. They're still slightly visible on some of them, but yeah, I just kind of gave up. I was honing for so long. I was like, you know what? I think it'll be all right. So the next step we're going to do is just measure these cylinders for maximum diameter, for taper, and for out of round. So to do that, we'll be using a bore gauge. It's already set. I use a micrometer to set it to the, I guess, the minimum diameter, and I just kind of ran it along. We're going to be doing 6 measurements, one at the top here, one at the middle, one at the bottom, and then we'll turn it 90 degrees, and we'll do the same thing, 1, 2, 3. We'll do that across all 6 cylinders and see if we're within specifications. I actually already did that. So these are the numbers. This is what I got. I'll just run them through real quick. 5 and 6. So the standard bore size that BMW says, so just to be clear, I got these numbers from All Data. It's actually hard trying to find these numbers. I looked on forums and stuff, and I couldn't find it. So I made an account with All Data, and I had to pay a little bit of money, but I got the right numbers. So this is the standard 3.3071. I'm guessing this is brand new from the factory, and they didn't have a maximum diameter, but they did have intermediate, which I think is the maximum for a standard bore, without overboring the cylinders. So 3.310 is the maximum diameter. What I can tell you is all of these are well within the specifications for diameter, which is good, because on the other blocks towards the top here, they were definitely out of spec with maximum diameter. I think the piston rings really love to chew up the top here, but on this one it's good. And maximum taper and maximum out of round. So BMW says that the max is 0.0004, which is crazy. That is less than half of a thousandth of an inch. I don't know how true this is, because on the other engines that I had, it was well out of this spec and they were running fine. So those are the numbers that when I measured them and compared, they were kind of out of round, especially, was off by over a thousandth of an inch. Taper wasn't too bad, but I think it'll be all right. I'm just gonna go ahead and send it, and if we have a problem, we'll know why. But I really think this will be okay. It's not anything too crazy. It's only off by thousandths of an inch, so it's just something we're gonna have to live with. So yeah, that'll do it for part one. My garage is currently a mess, so I'm gonna have to go through and clean everything up, but we got to get everything put back together first. I am going to be doing multiple parts. In the next part, we'll probably start putting everything back together, cleaning the pistons that we'll be putting in, and measuring the tolerances for the bearings, for the crankshaft, and for the pistons, for the connecting rods. And hopefully I can get those videos out a bit quicker. I do want to have a more consistent schedule, more weekly than monthly. So I'll be working my hardest to get that done. But yeah, it's cold right now, so I got my hood on and stuff. But yeah, we'll also be doing a ZF trans swap, so that'll be pretty cool. Once we get the engine put back together and stuff, we can move on to that. And if you guys liked the video and you guys made it this far, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to let me know if I'm doing something wrong or measuring something wrong, before I put everything back together. But yeah, hopefully this is a journey we can take together. So yeah, I'll see you guys in part two. Take care.